Awesome. Hello, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I want to welcome you to this evening's webinar. My name is Maddie, and I am from MadDIY Marketing. And I want to thank you so much for joining myself and the ladies from Growhaus Studio. This episode is a part of the Digital Shelf series, a series created in collaboration with Fund 17, Propeller, the Recirculating Farms Coalition, Food Policy Advisory Committee, and MadDIY Marketing. We created this series to bring food businesses together to discuss how we can adjust and adapt to a more digital shelf space that COVID-19 has placed on food businesses. Tonight, we'll be discussing a branding toolkit built for you by myself and Dana and Jasmine from Growhaus Studio. We are so excited to do this. But before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Please remember to keep your microphones on mute. This episode will be recorded, so please be aware of this. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of this episode. So please hold your questions until the end and we'll get them answered, I promise. We will also we were going to have a poll, but we're not going to do this anymore. So at the end of the webinar, please have your questions ready to go, and we're ready to answer them. So let's get started. All right, so thank you again for joining us. I'm Maddie, and this is the What You Need to Know Branding Toolkit episode. Grocery shopping has changed for consumers. What used to be a leisurely outing has become a stressful and overwhelming chore thanks to COVID-19. There are less in-store visits and more shoppers taking their retail purchases through e-commerce marketplaces. Consumers are also reaching for these familiar brands, the brands they know. And for you as a smaller food business, for you as a smaller CPG company, the retail climate has presented even more challenges. But all is not lost. That is why we are here tonight. There is a lot of ways that you can create a very positive consumer discovery for your brand towards your product. And it all starts with understanding how to build a sustainable, unique, and strong brand. So today we're going to walk through a branding toolkit that will help you build a customer base and strong brand recognition on the grocery store shelves and on the digital shelves. Oh, I've already introduced myself, Maddie, but I'd love for Dana and Jasmine for y'all to introduce yourselves.
Sure, I'm Dana Blandin. I'm the Director of Business Development at Growhaus Studio and also co-founder.
I'm Jasmine Henderson. I'm the Creative Director at Growhaus Studio and the other co-founder.
Awesome. So today we're going to go over the importance of branding, elements of brand identity, the branding toolkit that we've built that you will get after the episode, and how businesses use this branding for grocery store pitches, online and offline. And then we've pulled some examples of Growhaus clients and to kind of walk you through some of those examples of what we spoke to in the toolkit. All right, a quote from Seth Godin, author, entrepreneur. A brand is the set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that, taken together, account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. So we're all consumers. We all go to the grocery store. We all shop. And every minute, a new shopper shows up in your category. And they immediately begin processing all the visual data. So in mere seconds, studies show those mere seconds are 10. The customer takes in patterns, their eyes process shapes of products, colors, imageries, graphics, fonts, and words and copy in order to process all of the products of the category in front of them. As mentioned, the consumer spends around 10 seconds shopping a category before making a purchase decision. 10 seconds. That's a pretty quick amount of time. So as a CPG company, for your product to thrive, your branding and physical packaging has to make itself known and reach out to cause the individual's eye to stop and take note of what it is you're producing and your product. Branding is how your consumers perceive your company and the value that they assign to it. So we're going to be talking about those different aspects of branding. But first and foremost, before you begin branding, make sure you have a kick-ass product. You have a local following, you've gotten feedback from those close to you, the people who continuously support you, and they absolutely love your product. Feedback is so important, and that helps you build your brand. And as mentioned, your target customer is the key to developing a successful brand. When building your brand, this is all a part of the market research. Your branding is talking directly to your target customer. It's crucial that you, as a business, as a CPG product, you're understanding who your customer is, what they like, what they dislike, the demographics of your target customer, and the lifestyle that they live, because this guides your brand development and ensures that when you're creating your brand, that you're able to tap into those personal connections and at times also the emotional connections that your product will bring up in your customer. So for example, if you're a coffee company and one of your core values is to create economic viability for the community where you're purchasing your beans, for the farmers, for the betterment of their lives and providing them a fair price, this is going to be a value of your customer as well. So you will communicate this through your colors, through your copy, and through the images that you put on your coffee bag and throughout your visual branding. So as mentioned, you have your target customer, you have understanding your feedback and what people love about your product. The one last thing I'll speak to, and I know Dana will go into a little bit more detail, is understanding your competition and communicating to your target audience. So your competition is going to be a huge help in shaping your product for the shelf, your visibility, and how you communicate to your customers and how you make yourself stand out and differentiate your product against the others within your category. So this is where your package design will gain the most benefit, and Dana and Jasmine will go into that more shortly.
Absolutely. So to piggyback off of a lot of what Maddie said, your branding is essentially all about the different ways in which you are communicating your story. So whether that be visually or verbally or through the experiences that you provide as a company, all of those things essentially is something that your branding will feed. And good branding allows you to build your customer relationships and build customer loyalty on and offline. So let's dig into a little bit to what brand identity actually is, and some questions that you might want to ask yourself while building your brand identity, and what you should expect to include in a potential brand guide or something that you might use to create consistency for your brand. So brand identity focuses on the visible elements of your brand. As Maddie said, you're talking about your colors, you're talking about different aspects of design, your logo, all of those things that allow you to distinguish yourself, your brand in the consumer's mind, right? So some questions that you might want to consider when developing your brand identity. Who, like Maddie said, who exactly is buying your product? How would you describe your brand, and what separates you from the competition in general? So once you've decided those basic things like your colors, what your logo looks like, the types of font that you're using, those are things that you now want to start applying across your brand, whether you're doing it in your marketing materials, whether you are using it online, on your website, or to promote social media in any type of way. So what we're going to go through next is just a few different ways that you could practically be applying branding. And Jasmine, at any point in time, feel free to jump in and chime in.
Well, yeah. Well, just to piggyback off of what you just said, I think everything that you talked about is just a matter of establishing that likable and recognizable brand, which is a big benefit when you're looking for buyers in the stores, and then it will also keep that momentum going when you're talking to your end consumer, just making sure that everything is likable and recognizable, and identifying the things about yourself and your brand, meaning the way that you do things, anything in regards to the way that your product is made, special things about your mission. Those can all come out visually, and they can come out verbally as well.
Right. At the end of the day, customers want to know that your brand is reliable and trustworthy and valuable, right? So how are you communicating those values? You're going to do that through your brand messaging. You're going to use that through the imagery that you're using, again, whether you're doing that online or offline. So what imagery are you showing on your social media platforms? What imagery are you highlighting on your website? For example, if the most valuable part of your brand and your business is your products and essentially the ingredients that you're using in your products, are you highlighting those ingredients on your website? Are you making that one of the main focal points in your imagery? Those are the things that people really remember and they connect to, and so those are the things that you want to be highlighting visually and sharing visually. This also goes along with the experiences that you share with your customers, and I know I started this saying that your brand identity focuses on simply the visual, but you also have to think about the experiences that you're providing for customers on and offline. How do those experiences look? How do they make the customer feel? So those are all things that you want to consider. Just a few topics that, a few points that we can touch on and just speak about a little bit more practically. Your messaging, just being able to develop standard messaging about your mission, your vision, any general descriptions that you might have, any main headlines that you might be using anywhere with your marketing, and any call to actions that you also might be using in your marketing. Those are things that you want to have standard for the most part, and obviously you want to provide a little bit of variation depending on your audiences, but at the end of the day, you want those messages to sound consistent and the same all the way through, so that potential buyers or customers begin to recognize your brand and those words that you continually say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out, those are things that, like you said, like Dana said, to establish those things even before you have your first conversation with the buyer, even before you end up in stores. So even before you're in stores, you can be confident that, one, there's a market that's interested in either your product or what you have to say, and the way that you're presenting your product. You want there to be a market that's interested in all of those things, so that you can present to that buyer. So you're not just presenting your potential for volume, but you're presenting your potential for demand.
Absolutely. Another thing with messaging that I think sometimes tends to fall to the wayside because we're not sure how to distinguish it, but establishing a tone and a voice when developing your messaging. What is at the core of that? Is there a sense of urgency? Are you pushing a message of love? Are you pushing a message of being healthy, and you want to empower people to be healthy? Really considering your tone and voice is something that you also want to make sure is reflected in your brand messaging, because that tone and that voice is going to have to align with your core audience. Is it similar to the way they speak about things? Is it similar to the things that they are passionate about? So you want to pay close attention when you are developing your brand messaging to make sure that you're meeting the mark with tone, that you're meeting the mark with voice. And just to reiterate, what is your brand experience like on and off the shelf? Are you using the same colors consistently in your marketing materials on your website? If you're doing live demos, do you have materials that look and feel like your brand in the stores? These are all things that you want to think about prior to developing all of your marketing materials. You want to make sure that you found consistency and a level of standard in what those things look like. Okay, so I think we can. Well, I also want to take an opportunity really quickly while we're on this page, and I'll touch on this a little bit further also, but I want to take an opportunity to speak on my experience a little bit as a food service buyer, and certain things that I would look for with brands who were either pitching to me or wanted me to buy their product. And specifically, one of the most important things was, does your brand align with the brand that I'm buying for? So the brand that I was buying for at the time was a very high quality Mediterranean brand. So a lot of what they focused on was how certain products were crafted, the quality of the crafting, their marketing, and if that marketing aligned with what the Mediterranean company was also marketing. And what I found with a lot of those companies is that they came to the table really understanding what it was that we needed as a company and what we needed as a brand, and was able to present those things throughout their pitches and their presentations. So that's also something else that I want you guys to think about when you're developing your brand and you're thinking about what type of distributors are you going to, or what type of retailers are you going to? Are they companies that also align with your brand's mission and your brand's values? So I think this is a good opportunity for us to dive into the toolkit, where we can talk about what exactly belongs in your toolkit and what are things that you need to be focusing on within the toolkit. So we'll start with just visual communications. What does that look like? So first and foremost, your product. What do you make? What is unique about your products? Product or products? What stands out? Is it your ingredients? Are they the materials that you use to make your products? And are they going to continue to be affordable as your company grows and it becomes more accessible? Those are some things that you want to focus on. Jazz, I'll let you take the next one.
Well, as far as your name and everything, as far on the toolkit and your, excuse me, I just kind of lost my place. How does your brand name relate to your mission, your product, and your purpose or your value? Now, not necessarily just the name of your business, but what do you stand for? Are those things aligned with what your target market stands for? I know you might have a personal mission and you have a personal purpose for your business, but it's very important to align with what the target market will align with, and kind of put your personal stuff to the side and make sure that the things that stand out are the things that are most marketable to other people and in demand to other people. For example, if there's something about your product that is sustainable, say you have sustainable packaging, maybe you have biodegradable packaging, that's your opportunity to zone in on people who are interested in sustainability. Now you have a target market that you can speak to, that also tells you what kind of language that you could use. And it also tells you what kind of marketing. You could even narrow it down to what these people look like in their age groups, and different demographics. So those things are just the things that help with different marketing visually. If you know what the person looks like, if you can say that, this person might have a family, this person likes to exercise, those things aid all of the visual tools that you can use to market to that demographic.
Some other things in that tool, in that toolkit that you need to be aware of, and this one's probably weird because you're probably wondering, well, how do we visually communicate this? But price is something that you also need to be considering in your toolkit. How does the price point of your products compare to other competing products? Are you priced above market? Are you priced below market? Are you meeting the market standard? And the most important question is, who is most likely to buy your product at this price point? And I think the most important thing to think about with price, with branding, is how are you representing your brand visually? If you're priced a little higher and you're selling a luxury product, does your brand visually speak luxury? Are you using specific fonts? Are you using specific colors that express luxury? If you're producing something more of a commodity item that you're meeting people at market price, does your product look like it might be too pricey? Are you presenting it in a way that might scare people because they think they can't afford it? Or are you coming up with packaging or a look that makes people feel comfortable enough to feel like I can afford this and this is the type of product for me?
I want to point out something about price. It's very, you can add a little strategy to what you're doing there. Say you might be shipping a product and the cost of shipping for you might be $5. And instead of saying, well, $5.99 for shipping or $4.99 for shipping, you can just add that cost to the production cost or the actual price of the item, so that you can say free shipping. And that free shipping is way more enticing to customers. It's way more enticing to that end consumer than that $4.99 shipping. And it's more so just like the psychology of things that you can play with your end consumer if you are doing e-commerce. I know, for example, I don't know about Maddie and Dana, but if I'm shopping and I see something that says, any shipping price that is just too high, I don't care how much I want the products, I might rethink buying it. But if I see free shipping, I'm just more enticed to spend a little bit more money and add a little bit more to my cart. So it's important to understand the psychology of people and put yourself in the place of the end consumer when you're talking about price as well. And I'll move on to tagline. So your tagline is very, very important to establish this very early on and be repetitive about it. It can just be one sentence. It doesn't need to be long or drawn out, but just one sentence. I know we can probably think of other taglines associated with different brands. For some reason, the only one that's coming up to mind with me is Burger King, have it your way. But you know exactly what that means without someone even having to say Burger King. When someone says have it your way, automatically Burger King comes to mind. And you want to think about that with your tagline. So it needs to convey your product's value proposition, the major value proposition surrounding your culture and what differentiates you in your market from other people. And that's where it's very key to study your competition so that you can identify what that thing is that makes you very different from your competition. And that's usually what's going to be that's where your tagline is going to be involved in.
And just to add a little note with taglines, I feel like this is a concept that is overlooked by a lot of businesses. We don't really think about the tagline. We don't really spend a lot of time developing the tagline. But I think it's something that is so important for food businesses because the way that consumers purchase food, it's almost emotional, our relationship with food, right? Or the things that we consume. And I think a tagline is the perfect opportunity to connect with someone on an emotional level. And just to think of another tagline, it's not food related, but it's probably the most popular tagline in the world. Nike, just do it. Anytime we hear just do it, or we see those words on top of imagery promoted by Nike, you know what that means. It empowers you. You feel empowered to now just go do whatever it was that you thought about doing. And I think that is the power of the tagline, and also the reason why it shouldn't be overlooked.
And it might sound corny, but I think this is one of those areas in marketing where it's important to be corny, for lack of a better word, and repetitive. So that tagline is something that you should see throughout your packaging all the time. You should see it smack dab front and center on your packaging, just below your logo. You should see it on your website, front and center on your website, front and center on any of the printed materials that you have, front and center on any customer service materials that you might have, like emails or thank you notes if you're doing an e-commerce. So I think it's important to, this is your time to really zone in on what you want your culture to be. If you want there to be certain slang associated with your brand, if you want that language to come out, you know, if you're, you know, we're in New Orleans, so we all have certain, we all have a certain language, and you know what it means when you see it, and you know what the culture is when you see it, especially when food is involved.
Absolutely. So let's move on to website and SEO. And I think for food businesses today, particularly CPG companies, and particularly for small CPG companies, I think this is an opportunity to, with a website, you have an opportunity to expand your reach and expose yourself far beyond the potential of what you could do locally. So I'll start with my perspective from a buyer standpoint. So the first thing that I would do as a buyer in trying to find a new product or a new company is to do research. Now, I was a 25-year-old buyer, and that means that I wasn't necessarily picking up the phone to call every new product. I started online, and I was looking for you online, and I was trying to figure out, how can I get the information that I need from you as quickly as possible for me to be able to make my decision about whether or not you were a product worth looking into. I believe that not only having a website not only helps you from the wholesaler standpoint or distributor standpoint, as far as being able to provide information to buyers, but you also have the job of talking to your end consumer as well. And you also want to be able to do that with your website. So let's dig into certain things that you want to think about with your website. First of all, the overall question is, how are people finding your brand online? The number one way should be a website. In today's world, in today's digital world, having a website just reinforces your legitimacy overall. And I think that that's the first point to make about being able to have a website. So even if you're not necessarily running an e-commerce website, can people go online to legitimize your business, learn more about your company, and get some type of idea about your product and your values?
Yeah, and secondly, does your product or company show up on Google searches? I think this is the second thing. Once you have that website, are your descriptions serving you in Google searches? Because if someone doesn't actually know that you exist, the first thing they're going to do is put in a Google search for someone like you. And if they're looking for something local, they might go ahead and type in where they are locally. And if they're looking for a kombucha brand, they're going to put in New Orleans kombucha brand. And you want to make sure that you show up on the first page in that Google search. And that comes with having the right descriptions associated with the pages on your website. And that sounds a little complicated. I know when we talk about SEO, it's kind of just like this no man's land. People don't really know what to do there, but it's really just as simple as writing proper descriptions for the pages associated with everything on your website. So your homepage, if you are a New Orleans kombucha brand, those need to be the first 3 to 4 words in your description for your website. New Orleans kombucha. If you sell meat products, that needs to be one of the first things that you say. And not the title of your website, because that's always going to show up because it's your website. But you want to make sure that you're describing your business in a way that is associated with the way that people search online. So again, putting yourself in the position of the consumer, putting yourself in the position of the buyer who might be looking for a product like yours to put in their stores, or be looking for a product like yours to buy online.
Absolutely. And we can also dig into a little bit more of what a well-branded website should be able to tell people. First and foremost, who you are. That's something you're going to continue to hear throughout this entire webinar, because it's one of it. That is branding. Who you are and how people view you, that is branding. What do you make? What makes your product different and special? Where can they buy your products? This is particularly important for CPG companies who are selling to wholesalers or distributors. Not only do you want to inform your consumers on where they can go to buy products, because that is one helpful way that you can help your buyers sell your product, is by simply telling people where they can go to buy it. But it's also great for potential buyers to see who else you might be working with, what other companies you're selling out of. And I think that adds, that shows any potential buyer that there is demand for your product and that you're already selling in other places. And it's important to profile those different places on your website and make that very clear that you are selling in other locations.
I would say the best way to do that is also using user-generated content. The great thing about having a food product is that you can share it with people and you can get people's reactions and you can document that. And those are some of the best images to have on your website, especially when you're trying to attract retail buyers. You're just showing your demand. If you don't have the luxury of already being in stores, the next thing that a buyer is going to be looking for is, okay, do people like this? I need to see if people are enjoying this. Does it taste good? How do they interact with it? How do they use it? And user-generated content is one of the best ways to do that. Or you could, if you can't have a photo shoot, posting things like that online on your social media helps, and it also helps to have that on your website so that it's just like one designated place, like a calling card to say, this is who we are, and these are the people that enjoy our product.
Yes, indeed. So let's talk a little bit about packaging here. So your packaging is potentially a customer's first interaction with your product. In today's day, there's so many different ways where people can interact with your product, whether it's online or offline. But for the most part, for a lot of people don't learn about a product until they're actually in stores and they see it. So what does your packaging look like, and how are you capitalizing on the opportunity, the brief moment that you have for somebody to make an impression on a customer? What is your packaging telling them? What does it say? How does it relate to their lifestyle? And what does it say about their budget? What does it say about their diet? What does it say about their needs or who they identify as personally? How is your packaging relating to them in that way? And are you creating beautiful packaging that is going to stand out on shelves? And essentially, it's not just what your packaging looks like, but what are you saying on your packaging? What's standing out? What are you highlighting? If you know that veganism is at an all-time high and their consumers are looking for vegan-friendly products, are you putting that boldly on the front of your packaging so that I don't have to search the box? Because we all know that for people who are practicing a vegan lifestyle, how many times do you have to search the box to just make sure there's no milk products in there? I want to be able to see, no, this is vegan, and I want to be able to choose it, and I want to be able to say yes. So those are the types of things that you need to think about. What do consumers want to know about your product, and how are you displaying those things on your packaging? And also, in displaying information about your ingredients, are you being honest about those ingredients and what you're putting in your products? All of those things are important as far as your brand and identity is concerned.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback off of that, just also all the way, always keeping your brand consistency as far as like your colors, your logo, and your tagline, which I mentioned before. And also being consistent with the culture that you want to instill and attach to your brand, and the personality that you want to attach to your brand, and making sure that that aligns with people, and thinking about that in your packaging as well. For example, if you've identified your market as, again, being like a sustainable market, maybe they like to plant, even if they are vegan, is something about your packaging, maybe it's paper and you plant it in the ground and it's actually turns into a flower. I've actually seen that before. Or is your product something that you can reuse? Is it something where you can like reseal it once you open it? Really thinking about your customer in that way of saying, oh, they might want this, or this would be helpful, because those are the things that keep customers coming back. And again, it's just all about putting yourself in the position of that customer, because we all know, we've all had experiences with brands where we keep coming back, and it doesn't have anything to do with price. It's more so just about, I love this packaging and I love that they do this. And a lot of times it really doesn't have anything to do with the product that you're tasting or putting in your mouth. And it's really just all about the thought that went behind the product.
Yeah, and then the next couple of things I think you want to think about just in building your branding toolkit is what are you using for branded printouts? So that might include things like coupons, postcards, box inserts, signage, sales sheets. These things are all important in helping people sell your product or helping promote your product. So if you're a company and you are preparing to pitch to a new retail store or a chain of retail stores, one of the questions that they might ask you is, okay, what materials, what tools do you have to help us sell the product in store? These are things that you need to be thinking about, and you need to be producing them, and you need to consider your brand identity and how those things look visually. Again, are you using consistent colors to design these materials? Are you using consistent imagery so that consumers and buyers can start becoming accustomed with what your product looks like, how people use your product naturally? You really want to take the opportunity to sell the lifestyle of your products, and you can do those things in your branded printouts. You can even do those things with branded merch. So what merchandise can you provide to promote your product that aligns with your values? That could be things like coasters, stickers, shirts, water bottles, depending on what you're doing. You want to be using every opportunity that you can to promote your product outside of just simply selling it to a consumer or trying to sell it to a buyer. So overall, I think what we want to talk about next is just simply, let's dig into pitching to retail buyers in store and online. So just to run through quickly from a buyer's perspective, what am I looking for when you are pitching your brand to me, or you want me to consider your product? First of all, I need you to be concise, right? Because as a buyer, they're looking at so many people are approaching buyers on a regular basis to bring their product in, to add it to their inventory. And buyers don't always have a lot of time to sit down with every single person to figure out, okay, is this for me? You might have 10 minutes to give me your spiel. And honestly, what I want from you is your marketing materials. Give me your materials. I'll read it when I have the time to sit down. But if you're giving me those materials, what do they look like? Are they going to stand out in the stack of other sales sheets that I might have? Is it going to stand out amongst somebody else's spec sheet? Those are the things that I want to know as a buyer. And how are you making your sales sheet or your spec sheet stand out? I also want to know, and Maddie and Jasmine, feel free to chime in at any point in time here if you guys have feedback about these particular, about pitches in general and how to apply. your branding to these things. But also another thing that I want to know as a buyer, how well do you know your product? Can you answer questions for me quickly about your product? If I ask you about the traceability of your product, if I ask you about where you're sourcing your ingredients from, if I ask you about the process, about how it's made, can you tell me those things? And ideally, those things should already be outlined in your messaging and in your branding. Another thing, how well do you know my store? So if you are coming to pitch to me to put a product in my store, I want to know that you have some awareness about my store, the types of products that I'm selling. You already know that you align with the products that I'm selling. And I also want you to let me know where you think your product should be placed in all of this. So this is another thing that I want to talk about briefly, is just simply brand positioning. And I want to give an example here of a national brand that I think we might all know, maybe, that does a phenomenal job with brand positioning. So Harvest Snaps. I don't know if you guys know about Harvest Snaps, but it's a plant-based snack that you can find in most retail locations. You can find them in grocery stores. You can find them in Walmart. They're everywhere. The most interesting thing about Harvest Snaps brand positioning is that Harvest Snaps is a great snack. I love it. But guess where I won't find Harvest Snaps? In the snack aisle, because they don't sell it in the snack aisle. They position themselves as a snack that can be bought in the produce aisle. So it doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter which grocery store, which location you go to. You will always find Harvest Snaps in the produce section at any retail location. And there's a reason for that. Not everybody might go through the snack aisle, but everybody is going to go through the produce aisle. And it was something that Harvest Snap was very intentional about when they developed their branding and when they decided how they were going to distinguish themselves. That was the main point of distinction, is that you're not going to find this snack. We're not positioning ourselves as another unhealthy snack that you're just going to find in the snack aisle with the other plant-based snacks. You're going to find us in the produce aisle, and you're going to think that we're healthy because you found us next to the bananas and not next to the Doritos. So just in general, just thinking about before you go into a pitch, where do you want to be in that store, and really sell that? Why do you want to be in that section of the store? How do you think you're going to compete with the other products around you? And really sell that to the buyers so that they know that you understand what you're talking about and you understand your target audience. Again, we've said this so many times. What makes your product unique? Oh, I'm sorry, Maddie, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that and encourage CPG companies who are innovative and, creating a product that stores may not be carrying, understanding your demographic and your target customer and knowing that they're shopping for your product and where they're shopping and noticing the gaps in retail can work in your favor. So when you do go in and pitch these grocery buyers, letting them know that there's a need for your product, because they may not know anything about your product. So it's being able to give that elevator pitch, understanding your product, understanding who's buying it, and letting them know you don't have anything like this and I'm the brand you should carry.
Absolutely.
And I just want to piggyback off of what Maddie and Dana are saying, just communicating all of those things to the customer, to the buyer, physically and digitally, making sure that anything that you have physical, making sure that you also have a digital replica for that, because you don't necessarily know what type of buyer you're going to get. Like Dana was saying, she was a 25-year-old buyer. I've also been the 25-year-old marketer, trying to appeal to a 25-year-old buyer and quickly realizing that I'm not going to be in these people's faces most of the time. They're not going to be on the phone. They're probably going to lose any physical marketing materials that I give them. For what reason? Because they're looking for things online, whether they're looking for a website or they're looking for what's trending on social media. A lot of times the things that we find are right there on social media, just as a buyer and as a marketer. So just being aware of that and the different type of people that you're going to be communicating with, and making sure that you attack them on every medium and being consistent about every single one. Everything that you have your physical marketing materials, everything should look exactly the way it does digitally. So all of your branding should align with what you see online and vice versa.
And one more thing to suggest when you do go to in-store pitching or in-store meetings, always bring samples.
Yes.
Always make sure that the buyer is holding on to your product, they're tasting it, and you're bringing in your values, your personality, because that brand personality is what teaches the consumer how to use your product, like where they can take it. And you know, that goes alongside of the many other branding aspects, but always make sure you bring your product with you, because then it is a full circle with the grocery buyer, and they may love your product and just want to put you on the shelf for that sole reason.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great point, Maddie. I would say the easiest way to a buyer's heart is to either bring them samples or send them samples. And not just because they want free things, but you have an opportunity to not only get in front of that buyer, but potentially anybody else who might be in charge of making decisions. So I know that when I was a buyer, I would receive a lot of sample products and I would share it with my office and I would get their opinion and I would say, hey, how do you feel about this product? They're a contender. Let me know your thoughts. And if you are if you are the only product who sent samples to me and we're trying yours, you're automatically at the top because we've tried your product and you've already made the attempt to really solidify that relationship with that gesture. So yes, absolutely bring samples.
And then one more thing on the communicating to your customers physically, something that's changed because of COVID is in-store demoing. As I'm sure some of y'all know, that we are unsure as food businesses how we are going to be able to get back in front of the customer in a physical way, especially if your product isn't, say, you know, in 13 stores around New Orleans or Baton Rouge. So thinking about these unique and creative ways that you can get in front of your customers or potential customers physically. I know as a demo specialist for a few companies that since that's no longer happening, well, we need to get creative with using our brand, using our marketing strategies to get in front of our customers. So just something to also think about with your branding, that now customers can't always physically hold your product like they can during demos and give you those feedback. How can you bring that into strengthening your brand in these kind of new ways? So just wanted to speak to that as well, because that is a landscape because of COVID that is changing for food businesses.
I think that's a good point, Maddie. And I think that's also just more reason to be more creative with what you're doing digitally. If you want to utilize your email marketing a lot more to speak to those people about what makes your food brand different from your competition. If you want to set up situation, I know it might be different for whatever food business that you have, but something that I've implemented for a B2B business in the past is let's set up a situation where people can ask for samples, buyers specifically, where we give them a sample size or some sort of introduction to the brand. And that also can be included in your marketing materials, sort of like a brand box. Things that, you know, people can keep, they can share with their office, and that they can engage with just to get to know a little bit more about who you are and what you stand for, and then, you know, what it tastes like and what the experience will be. Because a lot of times, we will be sending things due to COVID because we can't have that in-store brand experience.
And I will say also with that, if you do decide to go with something like a brand box where you're sharing materials, what does that box look like? Is it just a regular cardboard box that you're sending to people? Is it branded in a certain type of way? Does your brand box speak to your values and who you are as a business? I think that is also important, and it's also very impressive. I think something that is so important that is often overlooked is that branding is not just about what you look like and what you're putting it out there. It sends a clear message that you care enough to invest in those things. It sends a message that you care enough about your customers. It sends the message that you care enough about your buyers to take the time to intentionally and strategically think about these things. Yeah, so that's my piece on that.
I want to add just a little tactic strategy. If you are sending anything in a box, to make sure, and you can't like brand your entire box. What you can brand is the tape that holds that box together. There are lots of companies that do this. You can also, ask whatever shipper that you're doing if they do custom tape like this. And all you need is a logo and your website, really. Just repetitive logo around in your tape. And if your box is wrapped in that tape, that's the first thing that you're going to see. So that's just a little tip for anybody that is shipping anything in a box and you want to, increase your brand experience with a, more affordable effort.
And on brand experience, I think with digital selling it becoming so popular, more popular, is that you also, a part of that brand experience is also your customer service. So making sure that when you are communicating with your customers digitally through email, if you're choosing to do the text route, if your phone call, we all have our own ways of communicating with our customers, but a part of that brand experience, and I think one of the most important is the customer service aspect, because that defines your brand as well. I think a lot of consumers who do purchase from, direct to consumer e-commerce platform, that customer service and communication with the business is important. And from my own experience, one of my favorite CPG companies, they shipped me their product and the product arrived not in perfect condition and immediately responded and sent me a new product. And to me, that further strengthened, I love their product. Their product is amazing. I use it every single morning, but just the way that they handled their customer service confirmed me as long as they're in existence, consumer of their product. So I just wanted to bring that up as Jasmine spoke to the brand experience. A part of that and remembering is the customer service as well. It's not necessarily a physical, tangible, you can hold it, but it is very important.
Absolutely. So we'll bring it all together here by showing you guys a few examples of just what consistency amongst your brand identity looks like. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Insanity Kombucha. There's some, this is a company that we've developed some branding on in their early stages. And I know, Maddie, you also work with Insanity with their marketing. So I think this is just a great example of how to reflect consistent brand identity across the board. So here we have an example for you of a brochure, a sell sheet, and a piece of a brand guide. So let's start with the brand guide, because I think that's the most important document for any new CPG business or any growing CPG business to have, right? How are you making sure that your brand is consistent all across the board, whether you're using a brand guide internally or you're using it externally because you're sharing it with partners or people who need to represent your brand? Generally, your brand guide should include something about your messaging, either your mission or your vision, something that just really speaks to your values and who you are and how you want to be represented. That message should also speak to your tone and your voice. Two things that we talked about earlier that is often overlooked, but is very important in making sure that you are representing your brand consistently and other people can consistently represent your brand. Outside of basic messaging are the colors that you're using. What does your color palette look like? What fonts are you using to represent your brand? If you do have packaging and you have variations to your packaging, this is also a place where you want to include the different color palettes or color codes or labels for your packaging. There should also be information as to how to apply your branding. So what does your Favicon look like if you're putting it on your social media platforms or you're putting it on your website? Your Favicon is that thing in the corner of websites when you're looking at the URL and you see your company logo. What does that look like? Where are you putting that? Because that's important. How are you applying your branding across social media? So if you're making social media covers, if you've designed those, what do they look like? Do you want those things to look consistent across the board? Any type of in-store materials you might be offering. So price tags, if you're designing price tags and you want price tags to look a certain way in stores, are you providing people with kind of a blueprint as to what that should look like? And yeah, so essentially your brand guide pulls all of those things together and it gives somebody the overall idea of how your brand should be represented wherever it is. So here with Insanity Kombucha, we have an example of their brand guide, which highlights their fonts, it highlights their color palettes, and they obviously have a few different flavors. So they have a few different labels that also need to be identified in this brand guide. We can look at the brochure and see that the colors are also consistent. The look is consistent. The logo is visible and clear. The elements of the packaging are also incorporated into the logo with the little chat boxes, for instance. You want to figure out how to pull together all those pieces with different elements of your design. Jazz, did you want to say something? Oh, sorry. And then you also have a sell sheet, which again, matches visually what's going on with the brand guide and the brochure, but the sell sheet in particular, which is the last photo at the end, this one is a little bit more informative. You can see things very clearly about the SKUs. You can see product specifications, which is so important to buyers. It's one of the most important things they need to know up front. What are your specs? Are you producing your product in within specifications that I need? If you're only producing bulk products and I need to sell individual products, you might not be the product for me, and I need to know that in advance. So those are all things that you want to lay out in things like your sell sheet. And then also identify the things that are valuable about your brand. So you can also see down here, if you zoom in good enough, at the bottom of this sell sheet, you will see 5 small points, just simply speaking on what are the differentiating factors about this brand. So this is just one example of how your brand identity can come together consistently.
And I want to point out what Dana's saying. If you are a B2B business and you're not really sure how all of these materials can transfer over for you digitally, all of this information that Dana just mentioned, with the exception of some things on the brand guide, meaning your colors and things like that, all of those things can be included on your website, and they need to be included on the website, specifically for buyers who may be, you know, just looking for more information about you online if they find you in a Google search, or somebody that you may have met in passing and you give them your website. This is just an easy way to give them all the information that they may need and to make a decision really on how you will fit into their store. So specs, points, key features about your product, all of those things are what they'll be looking for. And I would just suggest keeping those things consistent on your website as well. So if you want to have like a PDF download of a brochure that explains a little bit more about your sell sheet and your specs, or if you just want to have a gallery that does that as well. That's just for anybody, you know, trying to figure out where they fit in with their website if they're not selling on an e-commerce level.
And Dana, really quickly, would you suggest to the businesses here what of these materials are important for them to bring to a physical in-store pitch with a buyer?
Sure. So I would say the most important, the 2 most important materials to bring here is the brochure and the sell sheet. So for 2 reasons, right? The sell sheet in particular provides the buyer with all of the information ideally that they need to know to be able to make a purchase or to understand what they're getting from your product. The brochure is also helpful in understanding more about your company, but the brochure is also helpful in serving as a selling tool for any buyer who might be there. So I know that in my experience, I have asked certain suppliers or people who I was buying products from for their marketing materials. Hey, do you have brochures? Do you have things that I can share with, with our consumers, with the people who are shopping with us to know a little bit more about you? Because at the end of the day, my knowledge of your product only goes so far. And I don't think you necessarily want to depend on your buyer, the person who is reselling your product, to sell your product as well as you would sell your product and represent your product. So bring the materials that they need, not only to be able to make the decision, but to also move forward selling your product confidently to somebody else. And as far as the brand guide goes, that is something that I would say generally you want to use that internally. I will say that the only way, or one of the other ways that you might use the brand guide externally is if you're doing anything in partnership with someone else where you need them to represent your brand in the way that you would represent your brand. But for the most part, the brand guide is an internal tool. And I also want to make a note that your brand guide should consistently change as your brand changes. As you go through the years, your brand will continue to develop, and your brand guide also needs to reflect those developments. And Jazz, I'll let you take it away with Sugar Shack.
All right, so the Sugar Shack is another example of more so of a digital example that we've worked with. Is we did their e-commerce website. So just a little background about the Sugar Shack. The Sugar Shack started with one baker. She did custom cakes and events and things like that. And she decided to take it down to like pastries, and she noticed that people were loving her pastries. So instead of focusing on the cake business, she decided to package some of these pastries and these baked goods for e-commerce selling and in-store selling. So this is a really good example of a business, a small business that does a good amount of e-commerce selling and in stores. And she's actually in California, and a lot of the, I believe it's Mother's Market in California, all up and down the coast, and a few other stores as well. So what we did with the e-commerce website was just pretty much made sure that all of the packaged goods that she had were there, and really making a clear distinction between what you could get in the stores and what you can buy online, because you can't necessarily ship a lot of the products that she sells because they would go bad, essentially. So this is just like consistency all across the board. We, started with just a logo and the idea of cakes and pastries, and ran with that. And it's honestly from that e-commerce website has given her a lot of leeway to create other packaging that she has in stores. I want to say that like most of what she's doing with store buyers is word of mouth, and just focusing on volume. And again, showing people with the product, having really great photography, and just being consistent with that, and being consistent with the language that she's using. I think that is very important to point out as well. As you see in the screenshot there, satisfy your sweet tooth, but it's sugar-free though. Sugar-free products that are also delicious. I think that's something that we can all get behind, and putting those things at the forefront for people that don't necessarily know. And this is actually, a friend, and I'm proud to know her. But this is something that we like to boast about, because it's just a really great example of how to have best of both worlds, really. And it really shows you that you can.
Yeah, and just
Go
really
ahead.
quickly, just a last few comments that I want to speak to, just in particular with Sugar Shack. You know, when Shirley from the Sugar Shack came to us to build her website, she was in a place where she was trying to figure out, how do I get into retail stores? And one of the things that a buyer told her was, you need to show us that there is a demand for your product. And her solution to that was, okay, I'm going to build this website and I'm going to open up an e-commerce platform, and I'm going to show that I have the ability to not only sell online, but to sell in stores.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a very intentional decision for her to not only create this website, but to make sure to feature her products. And not only that, but have a whole page specifically dedicated to wholesale. And I know you guys might not be able to see it in this small image here, but there is a whole page just outlining what the process for wholesale buying is, who she's already selling to, products that you can buy wholesale, and she makes this information readily available to wholesalers. This website is also for her end consumers, so pay attention to how you're also segmenting your website simply for your end consumer who might be shopping from you through e-commerce methods right now, versus your wholesaler who might need information in a different type of way.
And one other thing I want to point out about, I was going to say her name, but one thing you want to point out about Sugar Shack is that everything that she has on her e-commerce website, they're not necessarily things that you can get in stores. So she really took that advice from that buyer, like above and beyond, because she established demand on her e-commerce website for specific items. So much that she was able to, secure a deal with one retailer and say, well, we just want you to make these items for us. So now you can only go to those markets to get specific Sugar Shack cupcakes and specific Sugar Shack popcorn flavors. And she really does segment the two so that she's able to also have that established brand on her own, and then also have a brand in stores. So yeah, go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, my only last comment was just to mention that a big part of Sugar Shack's strategy as far as getting into retail stores was also just simply pounding the pavement. And walking into stores and bringing marketing materials and bringing product. And can you imagine, as a buyer in one of those stores, how happy you would be to come across one of her cake pops or whatever the case may be, whatever she's selling. So anyway, this is just an example of how a small scale company can really over time just scale up using really just solid branding. So anyway, I know we're coming close on time here. So Maddie, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all so much for joining us. We'll deliver this presentation to you after our webinar series ends, and we're happy to go into a Q&A. But before you take off, I just want to invite you to join us to our next episode, which will be October 14th. And it will be an episode about emerging local markets in New Orleans. And it's going to be looking at outlets and avenues that you as a food business can utilize to sell your product, not through the community supported agriculture model, so other models. And that will be hosted by Marianne from the Recirculating Farms Coalition. She will be joined by Connor from Top Box, Louisiana, and then they will be joined by a Fund 17 Be the Boss Accelerator graduate from last year, Bypass Lines. So if it's not on your calendar, please join us. Again, thank you so much for coming tonight, and we are here to answer any questions that you may have.
If there are no questions, I am interested to know what types of businesses have joined us tonight for this webinar, or what products you're selling.
I see a couple of familiar names in there.
Oh, I can't see them because I'm screen sharing. Tell them to me.
We have Vance from Vaucresson Sausage. Our friend Vance.
Hey, Vance. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Graybird Baking Co., Taylor from Graybird Baking Company.
Awesome. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Vance.
Dana, I have a question for you because I see Vance in there, and if people don't know, Dana used to sell meat.
Yep.
As well. She used to be a buyer for a meat company. So are there any it's so funny to say that, but are there any tips that you have for not just for meat companies but for any business that's selling something where it's not like pretty pastries and it's hard to get the best photography, and you really do have to sell more of an experience with that?
Yeah, I think for food products in particular, and I can speak particularly on meat, it's always nice to see the product see the product applied. So how are you cooking it? What dishes are you making with that product? What can I make with it? How can I utilize it? How can I, so for example, I bought and sold meat to high-end restaurants at the time. So a lot of the questions that I would ask any person who wanted to pitch me their product was how can restaurants apply this? How can chefs apply this? What are different ways that I can recommend or sell? How can I upsell this product to someone in a way that is different from like ways you would regularly use that product in particular. What else can I say just in general? Recipes for sure. Yeah. Recipes for sure. And putting recipes on material. So having actual physical sheets or in this case, maybe digital PDFs that you can share with buyers. Like, hey, these are some cool recipes that you can be using. Because you have to remember that distributors are also active online. They're also active on social media. They also have to come up with their own marketing and sales tactics. And a part of that is the user-generated content that is provided from the products that they're selling and from those companies. So if you're giving them the tools to really promote your product, put it out there, giving them something that's beautiful and visual and looks delicious, they're more than likely to share those images. They're more than likely to pass along those recipes or offer up your product as a potential, good buy.
Yeah. I think that's good feedback for anybody that has a product that you don't necessarily consume, right out of the packaging. If you have to cook it, maybe you're adding it to a dish. Like you said, maybe you sell sauces, maybe you sell spices. I think recipes or just recommendations. I don't know if anybody's ever bought a bottle of wine. My favorite bottles of wine have recommendations on what to eat with them. So that's just a good tactic if you're selling any kind of packaged goods that don't necessarily come with, you're ready to eat right out of the packaging.
Also, another thing that I want to mention, just with anybody's products, don't be afraid to talk to buyers and suppliers about products that you might have on sale. Now, this is obviously once you've had a relationship with a buyer, but that is something that I think buyers are always looking for a good deal on something, especially something that aligns with what they're doing. And if you have an opportunity to offload some product with a supplier, don't be afraid to speak up and mention those things and talk to them about it. Not just, oh, I have this product that I need to unload, but hey, I have this product that can be used in these types of ways. And I think this would be great for you guys. And this is how you guys can use these products. And really just don't be afraid to try to move whatever product you have available with buyers.
We also have a question. What is the best approach to target your brand to specific ethnic groups or specific demographics like women or different ages?
That's a good question. Jazz, I think you'll have a good answer for that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different ways that you could do this. I'm going to talk about the digital way because we don't really have a lot of in-person chances for in-person exposure right now. I would say, first of all, including those groups in your visuals. If you're producing a video, if you're producing any type of photography with your product, including those groups in those visuals is the biggest help that you can do. And then also say you have somebody, you want to demo your product and you want to film it, you want to document it. Be very strategic about who you choose to demo that product because that is pretty much the marketing. That's that user-generated content that we were talking about before. So yeah, Vance, if you have, if you want to show off your new hot sausage, and you want to target women of a certain age range, just find some of those women and hand them a hot dog or something like that, and it sounds silly, but document all of those experiences that you have and start to talk to those people as far as using their language in your marketing. And a good way to just, strategize a little bit more if you're looking through things like social media. Pay attention to your competition and the way that they do those things. And I'm no stranger to just kind of like scavenging followers and figuring out who's who and following them and communicating with them and engaging with them on social media. But really it's just all about speaking their language and tapping into what they're interested in. So if you realize that you want to talk to women who are 25 and up or 30 and up, now's the time to start figuring out, well, what are they watching? What's popular? What's going on in the conversation? Maybe you can have like a wind down conversation. I don't know why wine's on my mind, but yeah, women of a certain age range, we like wine. So if you can include that with your food somehow, or if it's a breakfast option, just looking at, hey, Kelly Cole from Good Granola, if it's a breakfast option and, you want to target more women of a certain age group or a certain demographic, and you want to, just pick one topic that demographic can be centered around. So it might be fitness. It might be just kicking back with your family in the backyard and having a barbecue. And just if you pick one topic, that demographic is sure to be in there somewhere, and just focusing on that imagery is very helpful when you document those experiences. I hope that helped.
I will also add on to that and say that I think the biggest way to understand how to apply your branding to very specific groups is to really hone in on like what their specific challenges are or what their specific pain points are. And from that perspective, I think you can create an experience for them that is truly fitting, So if you are selling a product to women and your product maybe helps with hormone imbalance or something, that is something very specific to a certain audience, particularly women. So really figure out what is it about your product that truly speaks to the needs of that core, that core audience right there, or that core, I want to use the word buyer persona. It's not something we can really dig into, but it's the reason why buyer persona is creating kind of like a fictional idea of your core audience, or versions of your core audience is so important in helping you figure out how to apply your branding specifically to meet the needs of those people. And really what a buyer persona does is allows you to kind of just create a fictional idea of what that person's day-to-day life is like, what their lifestyle is, what their challenges are, and how you as a company or your product can come in to help solve some of those challenges. So it's less about Although you do want to show your audiences and the visuals as far as the people you're looking to serve, what they look like, their age range, their gender, those things are very important. But I think the other most important way to speak to people is just simply by identifying how does your problem solve that specific group's pain points.
And another thing, if you can't really dig, if you're not really there yet and you don't want to dig that deep, another thing is you can attract those demographics with things like your packaging, things like, you know, your marketing outside of actually showing faces. Say there's, this is a true story too, say there's a whiskey brand, and a lot of times whiskey brands associate any kind of like whiskey brand. When you see marketing for whiskey, you see men, and they're always in like these luxurious spaces, and they probably have a suit on and they got their leg cocked up. But getting a woman to be attracted to a whiskey brand is more so about, is there a pretty bottle? Does it come in a nice bottle that I'm going to be attracted to, that's going to get my attention from all the way across the store, from the store. And those are things that, you know, we've seen happen where we wouldn't recognize, and was like, I like the way that you marketed this for women without actually having to include us in the marketing. We know that it's there for us because we like the way it looks. We like what you're saying. So there's a few different ways that you can attract that demographic before you even get to the point of marketing. You can think about those things in the packaging as well. Yeah, good question.
Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank Dana and Jasmine from Growhaus Studio for being here tonight. Thank y'all for delivering such a wealth of knowledge to everyone who's attended. I'm grateful to have worked with y'all. And again, if you do have any questions that come up, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will be sending a follow-up email with this webinar recording and the PDF version of the presentation that you saw. And we'll also be sending the digital toolkit that Dana and Jasmine went through that explains the verbal and the visual communications that your branding includes. So thank you so much. And we hope to see you again at one of our future episodes of The Digital Shelf. Hope you all have a great night.
Thanks for having us, Maddie.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
Take care.
Thank you so much. And
is it just us on here?
It's just us,
oh,
yes.
Okay. I completely forgot the toolkit PDF, and I was like, oh God, I forgot to show it.
I completely removed Growhaus. Hold on, let me stop recording.